Ethan Marshall tightened his simple navy mobile tie and looked down at his reflection in the rear-view mirror of a mid-range rental car. This worn-out sedan was a world away from the luxury vehicles he was used to, symbols of power and success. But today, Ethan wasn't the CEO of Marshall Technologies, a multi-billion-dollar tech empire. Today, he was Edward Miller, a man in his 60s, unemployed, trying to land a mid-level job. The image in the mirror was nearly unrecognizable. The face once seen in business magazines, with neatly graying hair, firm skin, and sharp eyes, was now replaced by an aged countenance with thinning white hair, age spots, and wrinkles meticulously applied by a professional movie makeup artist. The prosthetics subtly reshaped his features to appear tired, his back slightly hunched, his eyes no longer sharp. Old wire-rimmed glasses, an outdated suit, and a cheap watch completed the transformation. He was now a man left behind by time. "Perfect," Ethan muttered, though a storm raged inside him. The anxiety was reminiscent of his early startup days, when he was still a young engineer, torn between dreams and the fear of failure. But this time, it wasn't about financial risk. This time, he was confronting a truth he could barely accept. Something was deeply wrong within the very company he had built. The briefcase in his hand didn't just contain a fake resume. It was his ticket into a personal reckoning. Inside it was the story of Edward Miller, a man whose background mirrored Ethan's from 2 decades earlier. A software engineering degree, solid management experience, now recently unemployed due to corporate restructuring. Ethan sighed as he stepped out of the car. The cold, vacant parking garage, once a source of pride when he cut the ribbon on its opening, now made him feel small and out of place. The long hallway leading to the elevator no longer embodied corporate grandeur. Now it was a corridor toward facing the truth about his company and about himself. Just 3 weeks ago, Ethan had brushed off complaints about age discrimination, but the reports kept piling in, all echoing a similar story. Older employees being downgraded without clear reasons, longtime contributors suddenly deemed burdens. HR's report had come back spotless, so suspiciously clean that it gave Ethan chills. That was when he decided to investigate the only way he trusted, by becoming one of them. The elevator dinged and opened on the 14th floor. Human resources. Ethan's heart pounded as he stepped into the reception area, his steps deliberately slow, mimicking the heaviness of age. "Good morning," he said, voice gravelly and slightly shaky. "I'm Edward Miller. I have a 10:30 interview for the project manager position." The young receptionist barely looked up from her screen. "ID, please." Ethan handed over the forged ID prepared by his private security team. Ethically questionable, but necessary for this mission. She checked it, then said flatly, "Take a seat. Someone will call you." No smile, no friendliness. Ethan sat in a modern chair in the waiting area, silently observing. Other candidates came and went, mostly younger, stylish, confident. He noticed the receptionist's demeanor shift, friendlier tone, more engaged eye contact. He couldn't help but feel like an outdated item, misplaced in a modern display, and 10 minutes past his appointment time. Then, 20, finally a young man appeared. "Mr. Miller, please follow me." Ethan rose, slowly following the staff member into a conference room where 3 people were already waiting. A man and 2 women, all in their 30s. Their eyes betrayed fatigue and a hint of disdain. "Hello, Mr. Miller," the man in the center said without standing. "I'm Jason Winters, HR Director. This is Rebecca Nolan, our COO, and Melissa Chen from the Project Management Office." Ethan froze momentarily. Rebecca was here? The COO rarely took part in mid-level interviews. That confirmed it. Something was deeply off within his own company. "Thank you for the opportunity," Ethan said, voice weak but sincere. I'm very eager to join the team at Marshall Technologies. Rebecca tapped her manicured fingers on the table, her eyes razor sharp. Let's not waste time, Mr. Miller. And so the game began. Your resume states you've been in project management for quite a while. Jason's voice had the tone of a carefully laid trap. Ethan, now Edward Miller, smiled gently and nodded, suppressing the unease building within. Over 30 years, he responded, with a mixture of pride and regret. I've managed everything from legacy systems to cloud migrations. Each project was a different chapter in the evolution of technology. Jason exchanged a look with Melissa, her eyes briefly suggesting she saw this as a history lecture. Impressive, Jason shrugged. But I see that in recent years you've been consulting rather than directly managing teams. Ethan remained composed. The question was expected. It was a deliberate choice. He explained, I wanted the opportunity to work across industries, technologies, and teams. I found myself learning more than I ever had. Rebecca cut in, her tone cold but polite. So, are you comfortable in an agile environment? Things change daily here, Ethan answered without hesitation. I've implemented agile since before it became industry standard. In fact, I helped pioneer early frameworks. Jason let out a dry chuckle, interrupting bluntly. Well, agile today is different. We run a very advanced version that requires a certain level of energy. The interview dragged on, but instead of being heard and valued, Ethan faced cold gazes, challenging questions, and dismissive attitudes. Every response he gave, words he would once have praised as a CEO, was brushed off as outdated. Finally, Rebecca leaned forward, her eyes sharp like a dagger through his disguise. Let's be honest. At your age, how do you stay current with technology? Our systems evolve constantly. Ethan gripped the folder in his hand, anger beginning to rise. Read, I take online courses, I build things, and stay updated just like anyone else, he said, voice firmer but controlled. The trio exchanged glances. Ethan saw Melissa stifle a smirk, a condescending smile, as if he'd just told a joke. Last question, Jason said. Why Marshall Technologies? Why now? Ethan had rehearsed this answer since the day he planned the operation. I've always admired this company. Ethan Marshall built a symbol of innovation and inclusion. I believe my experience can contribute to that mission. The room fell into heavy silence. Rebecca softly snapped the folder shut. Miller, she said sweetly, but with ice in her voice. I'll be direct. You're too old for this dynamic environment. Your methods, are outdated. We need people who represent the future, not the past. Jason nodded. Technology changes monthly. You'd take a full quarter to catch up. By then, we'll have moved on. Melissa no longer hid her disdain. I think a more stable role might suit you. Perhaps something like Rebecca dropped the final blow. The security industry is always hiring night shifts. Older folks tend to do well there. The three of them chuckled lightly, as if sharing a cruel inside joke. Ethan rose, awkwardly gathering his documents. His heart ached. He had feared this moment, but hearing it from his own company's leaders, especially Rebecca, felt like a stab in the back. I understand, he said, voice low. Thank you for your time. Jason nodded mechanically. We'll keep your resume on file. The corporate farewell for candidates who would never be called again. Ethan walked out, feeling their eyes follow his every step. In the elevator, he leaned against the cold glass wall, fists clenched, heart pounding. It wasn't just anger. It was heartbreak. A deep, unrelenting grief at the realization that the company he had nurtured was being twisted beyond recognition. A message from his assistant popped up. Board meeting at 2 p.m. Would you like to review the slides beforehand? Ethan replied quickly, yes. But his mind had already gone elsewhere. This was no longer about a bad interview. This was a wake-up call, a sign of something systemic dangerous, and spreading. Back home, he stripped off the disguise. Every prosthetic layer, every dab of adhesive like shedding a mask of silence. In the mirror, Ethan's true face emerged, worn, resolute, and consumed with thought. As the hot water cascaded over his skin, Ethan felt as though it were washing away the shame of that morning. But the words, "You're too old for this environment," continued to echo in his mind, like a wound refusing to heal. After changing into his usual tailored suit and sitting down at his desk, Ethan didn't open the board presentation. Instead, he accessed the internal secure portal, an interface only he and the CIO could access at the highest level. "Time to face the truth," he muttered. Data populated the screen. Ethan began building a personal spreadsheet, tracking hiring, promotions, and terminations by age. He no longer trusted the polished summaries he'd once accepted, and when the numbers appeared, his heart almost stopped. 3 years ago, the average employee age was 41. Now, it had dropped to just 36. Even more alarming, the number of hires aged 45 and above had fallen from 22% to under 4%. And in the past 18 months, 78% of voluntary resignations were from employees over 50. "This can't be coincidence," Ethan whispered, his eyes hardening with cold resolve. Silently, he dove deeper into the internal system, analyzing performance evaluations from thousands of employees. What he found nearly rendered him speechless. With veteran employees, those who had spent over a decade with the company, often praised for their dedication and expertise, suddenly began receiving critical reviews immediately after turning 50. The language was subtle but unmistakably biased, struggling to adapt to new processes, falling behind with modern tech, energy misaligned with team pace. Ethan recognized the truth instantly. These weren't performance problems. This was systemic age discrimination, carefully disguised as performance management. A knock at the door startled him. "Come in," he called quickly, minimizing the browser window. Jenna, his trusted assistant, entered with a tablet. "Your car will be here in 30 minutes. Do you still want to review the board slides?" "Yes, absolutely. Just give me a few more minutes," Ethan replied, trying to keep his voice steady. When Jenna left, he returned immediately to his investigation. This time, he turned to the financial data, because if someone was forcing out older employees, there had to be a clear motive. Money. And then the numbers emerged, cold as a blade cutting through trust. In just 2 years, pension liabilities had decreased by 31%. Healthcare costs had dropped by nearly 17%, an unusually steep reduction, far exceeding any standard cost-saving initiatives. There was no longer any doubt. Someone was targeting the more expensive employees. Those who were older, earned higher salaries, received better benefits, and were nearing pension eligibility. Ethan picked up his encrypted phone and called Marcus Webb, the head of information security. "Marcus, I need you to look into something discreetly. Who's been accessing the performance evaluation systems most frequently this past year? And give me a list of who's met with our benefits consultants recently." Marcus hesitated. "That's a sensitive request, sir. It's a security matter. Just between you and me." 20 minutes later, as Ethan was en route to headquarters for the board meeting, his phone buzzed with a secure message from Marcus. The data confirmed his worst suspicion. Rebecca Nolan. She had been accessing HR systems at an unusual rate. She had also held 7 meetings with benefits consultants, none listed on her official calendar, yet all recorded by building access logs. "We've arrived, sir," the driver announced. Ethan walked into headquarters, greeting staff with his usual warm demeanor. He smiled, but inside, he felt like a soldier entering enemy territory. In the boardroom, during the quarterly financial review, Ethan sat quietly. His gaze occasionally drifted to Rebecca, seated across from him, polished and composed, offering sharp insights as if nothing were wrong. He had once seen her as his ideal successor, a protege he had mentored for years. But now, as he watched her, all he felt was betrayal. Rebecca wasn't just pushing out employees who had given their lives to the company. She was using that very act as leverage to advance herself, casting it as the courage to make tough decisions for the company's future. After the meeting, Ethan returned to his office and locked the door. He needed more concrete evidence before confronting Rebecca. He accessed the internal email system using emergency override credentials, a function he had never used before. Email threads surfaced, each message like a dagger to everything he had believed in. In correspondence with senior HR staff, Rebecca referred to the plan as Operation Refresh, a benign-sounding name, but with clear intent. Eliminate legacy employees she deemed obstacles to innovation and cost efficiency. One email to Jason Winters hit Ethan hardest. Keep the pressure on Peterson in engineering. His pension vests in 3 months. If we get him to quit before then, we save nearly $2 million. Ethan felt paralyzed. This wasn't just age discrimination. It was a calculated financial strategy, targeting the very people who had laid the foundation for Marshall Technologies. People who didn't just work here, but believed in it. Finally, he found confidential emails sent to 2 board members. In them, Rebecca positioned herself as the only executive capable of controlling unsustainable employee costs. Her words were sharp and strategic, but her ambition was crystal clear. She wanted his job. Outside the window, the city lights flickered on. The office was growing quiet, but Ethan sat in the glow of his monitor. Alone, the company he had built on innovation and humanity was rotting from within, and the person dismantling it was the one he had trusted most. All for cost savings, for numbers, for optimization. Ethan stared out, the city blurring before him, but in his heart one decision crystallized. No one gets to discard people for profit, and he would not let it continue. "This ends now," Ethan said to the empty room. His voice echoed like a vow. No more hesitation, no more doubt, only resolve, and a deep belief that justice still had meaning. Even in a profit-driven world, he picked up his phone and texted the one executive he trusted implicitly. CFO Michael Chen, 7:00 a.m. tomorrow. My place. Tell no one. Tomorrow, Ethan would begin dismantling Operation Refresh, but tonight he needed more than data. He needed voices. He needed to hear directly from those quietly forced out of the dream they helped build. Morning sunlight bathed Ethan's home office in amber. As coffee brewed in the kitchen, he laid out the evidence on his desk. Charts showing demographic shifts, emails exposing the purge strategy, spreadsheets detailing pension cost reductions. At precisely 7:00 a.m., the doorbell rang. Michael stood outside, concern etched across his face. "This is unusual. Even for you," Michael said. Ethan silently led him into the office. When Michael saw the documents, he stopped in his tracks. "What the hell is this, Ethan?" "The systematic dismantling of everything we've built." Ethan handed him the age distribution charts. Michael's brow furrowed. "You're getting younger way too fast. That's not natural turnover." "Exactly," Ethan replied. "Now look at these." Michael scanned the performance evaluations. Peter Donovan, missing deadlines. His eyes widened. He hasn't missed one in 15 years. And Sarah Miller? Resistant to new tech. She led our first cloud migration. Ethan passed him Rebecca's emails. Michael went pale. Operation Refresh. She's targeting people before their pensions vest. This is... He paused. "This is illegal, and Rebecca is behind it all?" Ethan nodded, eyes steely. "She's been orchestrating it quietly for over 2 years. And worse. This," he said, handing over the board member communications. Michael sank into a chair, disbelief washing over him. "I knew she was ambitious, but using age discrimination as a career ladder? I didn't see it either. She was too clever." Ethan sighed. The quarterly reports were always spotless, costs down, productivity up. But underneath, blood and tears. What do you plan to do next? I need to understand the full scope. Ethan poured coffee for both of them. The data tells only half the story. I need to hear directly from the people affected. Michael looked uneasy. You can't just go around questioning employees about discrimination. Word will reach Rebecca instantly. Ethan gave a faint, knowing smile. Exactly. That's why I'm not doing it as the CEO. He opened a drawer and pulled out a silver picture frame. In the photo, a younger Ethan stood with 5 others, all wearing t-shirts printed with Marshall's Original 6. Remember this, our first office? Michael took the photo, a flicker of nostalgia replacing the tension. How could I forget? The 6 of us in that garage, dreaming of changing the world. 3 of us are still here, Ethan said. You, me, and James, in engineering. James still has deep connections with the veteran employees. I need him to be my eyes and ears. Michael hesitated. James has worked closely with Rebecca for years. He won't turn on her unless he sees undeniable proof. He doesn't need to betray anyone. I just need him to listen. After securing James's cooperation, Ethan went about his day as usual, leading the company with a calm facade. Meanwhile, Michael quietly pulled more financial records. By late afternoon, James had already spoken with several longtime employees. Many were eager to talk. The next morning, Ethan canceled his entire schedule and met James at a small coffee shop far from the company offices. It's worse than you think, James said, sliding a notebook across the table. I spoke with 12 people yesterday, all over 50. Every single one suddenly started receiving negative reviews after years of excellence. Ethan flipped through the pages. Each note was a punch to the gut. A veteran developer removed from projects without explanation. A marketing director excluded from strategy meetings. A customer service head with 30 years of experience told their communication style didn't fit the modern company culture. James leaned in, lowering his voice. There's more. Some were offered early retirement, but with a clear threat. Take it or face performance improvement plans so harsh they'd be impossible to survive. How did they react when you approached them? Mostly relief. Finally, someone's listening, but also fear. They're terrified of retaliation. Ethan's phone buzzed. A secure message from Michael. Found unusual severance payouts, all approved directly by Rebecca. Bypassed all standard procedures. Ethan closed the notebook, heart burning. The truth was surfacing, bit by bit, cut by cut. But the full picture was now undeniable. This wasn't just a scheme. It was a purge. And leading it was the very person he once saw as the heir to his vision. All recipients signed NDAs. But we'll keep digging. As Ethan drove back to headquarters, the puzzle pieces clicked together into a terrifying panorama. Rebecca had built a near-perfect system, removing older employees under the guise of performance issues, tying severance to silence, and hiding the moral carnage behind the glossy efficiency of cost-saving reports. When Ethan entered his office, he saw a new meeting request from Rebecca in his inbox. Strategy discussion. 4 a.m. clock p.m., he clicked accept. He wanted to see what move she'd make next. At 4 o'clock sharp, Rebecca walked in. Her posture was confident, her smile light, radiating the aura of a leader nearing victory. Thanks for making time, Ethan, she said, placing a folder on the desk. I've got some exciting growth projections to share. The folder read, Strategic Workforce Evolution, a title more fitting for an economics thesis. Rebecca launched into her presentation. Buzzwords flying, optimizing human capital, reshaping cost structure, realigning workforce demographics with market dynamics. But each polished phrase only made Ethan feel colder inside. Beneath all that glossy language lay a brutal reality. She was justifying the destruction of careers and calling it a development strategy. As a result, she concluded with enthusiasm. We'll see a 22% increase in profit per employee by year end. The board will be thrilled. Ethan asked quietly. Ripek smiled. This initiative is my work, of course, but it reflects your leadership. Ethan nodded mildly, maintaining his poker face. Impressive, very thorough. When she left, the fury inside him had frozen into something sharper. Not anger. Resolve. Rebecca wasn't just harming people. She was proud of it. And worse, she believed he'd approve, or be too blind to notice. She had miscalculated. Ethan picked up his phone. Michael, James, tonight, 8:00 p.m., my house. Bring everything. It's time. The next morning, Ethan walked into headquarters with surprising calm. The strategy session the night before with Michael and James had locked in the plan. Gather testimony, confirm the pattern, and prepare for confrontation. But they had to tread carefully. Rebecca had allies embedded in HR and on the board. As he stepped off the elevator on the executive floor, Ethan noticed the change. Clusters of employees murmured in corners, falling silent as he passed. A storm was brewing. Linda Watson, his executive assistant of 15 years, waited at his office door. Her expression was deeply concerned. Sir, you need to know something. Behind the closed door, Linda lowered her voice. Words spreading across the company. People are saying older employees are being targeted. Ethan set down his briefcase. How exactly? It started in engineering. Someone noticed that in the last year, everyone over 55 was either laid off or pushed into early retirement. They checked other departments. Same pattern. How far has this gone? Everywhere. It's all over internal chat. People are being careful, but they're scared. Ethan was silent. He'd planned to build the case step by step, but the truth was spilling out on its own. Anything else? Linda hesitated. Several veteran employees want to speak to you directly. They don't trust H. Ethan decided immediately. Clear my calendar after 2:00 p.m. Anyone who wants to talk, have them meet me in the small conference room on the 22nd floor. No appointments, no records. By 2:15, the hallway outside the 22nd floor conference room was full. Ethan sat alone, taking notes as one employee after another shared their stories, and each story was a knife to the heart. Frank Peterson, a senior engineer with 28 years at the company, spoke with a trembling voice. They started by pulling me off the projects I'd led for years. Then they assigned impossible deadlines. When I missed them, it went into my performance review. Did you speak to HR? Frank gave a bitter laugh. They called it a career transition meeting. Told me that at my age I should consider retiring to preserve my legacy. Another employee, Maria Gonzalez from accounting, shared how she'd been passed over for promotion 3 times, despite training every person who got the job instead. Last time, Mr. Winters from HR told me the company needed younger perspectives and leadership. Maria said softly, her head bowed, tears welling in her eyes. I've worked here for 22 years. I built this financial system from the ground up. The stories continued, each one a memory, a wound, a life diminished by the cold cruelty of a so-called strategic initiative. And even though Ethan already knew the truth, each testimony pierced his heart anew. Manipulated performance metrics, reduced responsibilities, vague pressures, thinly veiled threats. The pattern was cruel and undeniable. Near the end of the afternoon, Grace Chen, a product manager approaching retirement, broke down in tears as she sat across from Ethan in the small conference room. Her usually steely composure gave way. I've given this company 30 years, she sobbed. I moved homes 3 times for projects. I missed my son's college graduation to deliver a product launch on time. Ethan sat in silence. What he once saw as symbols of dedication were now weaponized as reasons for dismissal. Last week, Grace continued, wiping her tears. They said my role was being restructured. I could take a demotion or a severance package. No other choice. She looked him straight in the eye, her sorrow hardening into resolve. I'm not accepting either. I'm going to fight. Some of us are considering legal action. Ethan nodded. He knew a lawsuit would expose everything, but it would also tear apart the company's reputation, a legacy he had spent half his life building. It could drag on for years and create more victims. There had to be another way. A way to restore justice without destroying everything. When the last employee left, Michael and James entered the room. 27 people, Michael said, flipping through Ethan's notebook, all with nearly identical stories. And that's just the brave ones, James added. How many left silently? At least 43 in the past year. Michael checked his tablet. All signed unusual NDA. Ethan stood and walked to the window. From this floor, the city view was obstructed, unlike the sweeping view from the CO's office, a perfect metaphor. His perspective as leader had been blocked for too long. We can't wait any longer, he said. Rebecca has to be stopped. Before more people are hurt, we should bring in legal, Michael suggested. No, the legal chief reports directly to Rebecca. If they catch wind of this, the plan is dead. James leaned forward. So, what's the move? Tomorrow morning, I'm calling an emergency leadership meeting. All department heads, executives, HR, Ethan said, turning back, eyes resolute. It's time to bring this into the light. As the three of them finalized their approach, Ethan's phone buzzed. Linda, Rebecca's asking why your afternoon is clear. Says she needs to see you urgently. Let her wonder. Ethan replied. Tell her I'll see her at tomorrow's meeting. That evening, as he prepared documents for the confrontation, his private landline rang. A number only a handful of trusted people had. It was Helen, his ex-wife and a major shareholder. Ethan, she said bluntly. Rebecca Nolan just called me. She's concerned about your erratic behavior. Asked if I've noticed any recent changes. A chill ran down Ethan's spine. She's making her move. I thought so, Helen replied. She hinted that some board members are questioning your leadership, especially your resistance to necessary cost-cutting measures. She's planting seeds of doubt before I can act. Whatever you're planning, do it fast, Helen warned. She's already making her play behind the scenes. Ethan hung up, pulse racing. The battle had entered a critical phase. Rebecca wasn't just pushing out older employees, she was pushing him out. He sent one final message that night to Michael and James. Change of plans. Meeting at 8:00 a.m. tomorrow. We move first. The next morning, tension hung thick over Marshall Technologies. An emergency meeting of all top leadership, with only 12 hours' notice, was unprecedented. Rumors flew. Quarterly loss? Merger? No one suspected the truth. Ethan arrived at 8:00 sharp, flanked by Michael and James. His stern demeanor sent a hush through the room. Rhea entered last. Her confident stride faltered when she saw the thick folders at each seat. Thank you all for adjusting your schedules, Ethan began from the head of the table. Today's meeting isn't about market strategy or financials. It's about something that threatens the ethical foundation of this company. He surveyed the 22 senior leaders, some curious, some anxious. Rebecca looked increasingly uneasy. Please open the folders in front of you. Paper rustled. Gasps followed. Eyes widened in disbelief. Inside were raw data. Charts, emails, employee statements, all exposing a deliberate, systematic pattern of age discrimination. For at least 2 years, Ethan continued, voice steady. Older employees have been targeted, their performance reviews manipulated, their positions restructured to force them out. Everything was cloaked in the language of performance management and cost optimization. But the result was shattered careers, stolen dignity, and silenced voices. Jason Winters from H squirmed in his seat. 2 department heads exchanged pale glances. The reckoning had begun, and this time Ethan would not retreat. But it was Rebecca who spoke first, her voice taut with effort. Eden, these are very serious accusations. she said, glancing around. If there have been missteps in management, we should investigate. But to suggest there's a systemic issue, that's a stretch. She smiled politely, but the expression rang hollow. Our workforce evolution strategy simply aligns staffing with industry standards. Ethan repeated the phrase, his tone deliberate and firm. Workforce evolution strategy. An interesting euphemism for eliminating employees over 50. He pressed a button. The screen at the end of the room lit up. An email appeared, Rebecca's, titled Operation Refresh Q3 Targets. Silence. The executives read in stung disbelief. The message detailed precise percentages of legacy employees to be removed from each department, particularly those nearing retirement or pension eligibility. Ethan looked directly at her, voice low but cutting. This is what you call industry alignment? Rebecca's composure cracked. That email lacks context, she said, trying to recover. We were discussing projected natural attrition. There was nothing natural about it. Ethan cut her off, switching the display to performance evaluations. These are from 10 veteran employees, all with stellar reviews for years. Then, conveniently, their scores plummet, right after reaching the age milestones outlined in your documents. He turned to Jason, HR Director. Jason, how do you explain Angela Torres, 18 years of excellence? Then 3 months after her 55th birthday, she's rated as underperforming. Jason's face flushed red, his lips tightly pressed together. Before he could respond, Ethan projected another document, Rebecca's own financial analysis, highlighting savings achieved through streamlining the workforce and reduced pension obligations. This isn't about performance, Ethan said, his voice now filled with controlled emotion. This is about money, specifically targeting older employees to reduce benefit costs. The atmosphere in the room shifted. Some of the executives began exchanging uneasy glances. The chief marketing officer, seated near the end of the table, spoke hesitantly. I had no idea it was happening at this scale. I thought the cases in my department were isolated. That's exactly what they wanted you to think, Michael said, rising and walking to stand beside Ethan. You only see the pattern when you analyze company-wide data over time. Rebecca shot up from her seat, her face pale, voice sharp. This is ridiculous. We've made difficult but necessary decisions to stay competitive. If a few older employees couldn't adapt, that's unfortunate but inevitable. Ethan stared directly into her eyes. Is that what you told yourself yesterday when you interviewed Edward Miller? Did you think he was too old for this fast-paced environment? Rebecca's eyes widened. Her mouth opened to speak, but closed again. That was you. The room buzzed with murmurs of disbelief. Ethan nodded. I needed to see firsthand how those interviews were conducted. I had to become a victim to truly understand what others were experiencing. Rebecca regained composure with alarming speed. Even if a few managers used inappropriate language during interviews, it doesn't undermine the validity of our modernization strategy. Look at the numbers. Profits are up 18% year over year. She gestured to the financial results displayed on the screen. And what did that number cost us? Ethan asked, his voice like steel. Let me show you. He played a video compilation of anonymous employee interviews. Their faces were blurred for privacy, but their voices and pain were crystal clear. One by one, they spoke of feeling discarded, belittled, betrayed. The final clip featured Grace Chen, her voice cracking with emotion, tears streaming down her face. I gave this company 30 years, and they made me feel worthless. When the screen went dark, silence filled the room like a funeral. Ethan looked around at the faces he had once dreamed with, fought beside, and built Marshall Technologies alongside. This is who we've become, he said slowly, heavily. A company that throws away the very people who built it just because they've grown older. He paused. Is this the Marshall Technologies we set out to create? Rebecca's face had gone pale, but her voice remained icy. She hadn't collapsed, but the fortress around her was visibly cracking. "Sentiment doesn't keep a company competitive," Rebecca said, her voice strained but resolute. "Sometimes hard decisions are necessary to survive." "Enough." Ethan's words cut like a blade. "No more restraint. No more tolerance. Discrimination isn't a hard decision. It's illegal. It's unethical. And it destroys everything this company was built to stand for." He turned to the entire room, his gaze unwavering. "Effective immediately, I'm ordering a full audit of all performance reviews, terminations, and forced retirements over the past 3 years. Every affected employee will be contacted and offered proper remediation." He looked back at Rebecca, who could no longer hide the panic rising on her face. "As for those behind this scheme, there will be consequences. Starting with you, Rebecca. You're suspended, effective immediately, pending investigation. Security will escort you to collect your personal belongings." Rebecca's face flushed with fury. "You can't do this. The board has already been briefed," Ethan interrupted, not blinking, "including the part about your covert attempt to undermine my leadership in a bid to take over." As 2 security staff entered, Rebecca looked around the room for allies, but no one met her eyes. Those who had laughed with her, strategized with her, now bowed their heads, avoiding her gaze. She had lost. After Rebecca was escorted out, Ethan stood silently for a moment. The room still hung heavy, like the aftermath of a storm. "We start again. Today," he said. "Not just policies, but trust. Marshall Technologies will be a company where experience is valued, not punished." The meeting ended in silence. Executives filed out, their faces thoughtful, clearly bearing the weight of a new mission. Only Michael and James remained with Ethan. "That was quite a takedown," Michael said softly. "It wasn't a takedown," Ethan replied. "It was justice." He bent down and gathered the documents on the table. "The real work begins now. We have people to call back, careers to restore, and a company culture to rebuild from the ground up." Outside the boardroom, word spread fast. For the first time in months, older employees walked taller, knowing they would no longer be left behind in the very company they helped build. 1 month later, in the company's largest auditorium, Ethan stood at the podium. Every seat was filled. Hundreds of employees lined the walls, thousands more tuned in from global offices. The room buzzed with anticipation. "Good morning," Ethan began, his voice steady but emotional. "Today marks both an ending and a beginning for Marshall Technologies." He paused, sweeping his gaze over the crowd, young and old, new hires and longtime staff alike. "First, I want to apologize. As the founder and CEO, I failed to protect the values we built this company on. I didn't see, or refused to see, what was happening right under my watch. And for that, I am truly sorry." The room fell silent. Not a whisper, just respect. "The internal investigation is complete, and the results are heartbreaking. 74 employees were affected by age-based discrimination over the past 3 years. Ethan took a breath, then outlined the company's course of action. First, a public apology and acknowledgement of responsibility. Second, comprehensive restitution, including reinstatement and back pay for those wishing to return. Third, a prevention system, the creation of an independent ethics committee with representatives from all age groups and departments. From now on, all hiring, promotion, and termination decisions will be subject to transparent oversight. As he detailed additional measures, blind resume reviews, mandatory diversity training, and whistleblower protections, Ethan noticed tears in the eyes of several older employees. For many, these changes came too late, but they brought something rare: hope. In terms of leadership, he continued, Rebecca Nolan has been terminated for her role in the discriminatory campaign. Jason Winters and 2 other directors have resigned. Their replacements will be chosen through a transparent process where experience is valued equally with innovation. Ethan paused, voice catching slightly. Now for the most important part. To those who were pushed out or made to feel unwelcome because of your age, I invite you to return. Because this is your company. You built it with me. Your knowledge, wisdom, and experience aren't liabilities. They're our greatest assets. The crowd rose in a standing ovation. Applause thundered through the auditorium and echoed across satellite offices. As the room quieted, Ethan ended with a personal vow. Moving forward, I will personally oversee all executive operations. No more delegation without oversight. No more trusting numbers while forgetting the human stories behind them. That afternoon, Ethan spent his time meeting with each of the employees affected. Each conversation was an emotional journey. There were tears, anger, and hope. But every meeting ended with a handshake, or more often a heartfelt hug. Frank Peterson, the senior engineer who had been pushed to the brink of retirement, sat across from him at the end of the day. I never thought I'd walk back into this place, Frank admitted. After everything, I figured there was no room for me here anymore. There's more than room, Ethan smiled. There's purpose. We want you to lead our new engineering mentorship program. Frank looked surprised. You're serious? Absolutely. Experience can't be downloaded. It can't be learned in a few weeks. Experience comes with time, through failures, through hard-earned lessons, and by never giving up. We need that wisdom. As the sun dipped below the skyline, casting long shadows across the tower's glass windows, Grace Chen, the woman whose emotional testimony had become a turning point, quietly entered Ethan's office. I wanted to thank you, not just for letting me come back, she said, settling into a chair across from him, but for listening when no one else would. Ethan looked at her, a deep ache in his heart. I should have been listening all along, he said softly. It shouldn't have taken a disguise and pretending to be a victim to finally see the truth. Grace smiled, a gentle, knowing smile. Sometimes, she said, we have to walk someone else's path to understand the journey they're on. She paused, her eyes contemplative. These new diversity policies, they look promising, but how will you ensure they don't fade away? What happens when you eventually step down? It was the question Ethan had asked himself for weeks. He took a deep breath before answering. By weaving respect for experience into our company's DNA, again, he said, and by making sure our leadership and board reflect the diversity we want to foster, including age diversity. That night, Ethan walked quietly through the office floor, now being readied to welcome returning employees. At each desk, there was a personalized welcome note and a small gift. A framed photo of their original team, or a memento from the company's early days. A simple message: we remember you, and we need you. Passing the former executive suites, now under renovation to become open collaborative spaces where leadership would work alongside their teams, Ethan felt a pang of reflection. They had come dangerously close to losing the soul of Marshall Technologies, swept away by cold terms like restructuring, cost optimization, and workforce evolution. Under Rebecca, the reports had looked brilliant. Profits up, costs down. But hidden beneath the numbers was a toxic reality where people were viewed as burdens, and trust had been sacrificed for speed. Back in his office, Ethan found a small package on his desk. No name. Inside was a gift that left him speechless. It was from the original 6, the founding friends who had started Marshall with him. Inside the box was a new silver frame, holding a photo of the 6 founders, now older, grayer, standing alongside 6 of the company's youngest employees. Tucked inside was a handwritten note. The past and the future, together. This is how we build something that lasts. Ethan placed the frame on his desk. It would serve as his daily reminder of what truly mattered. The company would recover financially. He knew that. Investors were already responding positively to the transparency and ethical reform. But real success wasn't in the numbers. It was in rebuilding a culture where creativity and experience didn't compete. They walked hand in hand. As he prepared to leave, Ethan's phone buzzed with messages from departments across the company. Stories of returning colleagues, joyful reunions, and long overdue smiles. Each message was proof they were on the right path. Marshall Technologies had come dangerously close to losing its soul, lured by short-term gain and emotionless speed. But the road to redemption had begun. Step by step, person by person, action. Ethan turned off the office light and stepped out, his heart heavy, yet at peace. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but also new chances to prove that a company could innovate and honor its past. That its greatest assets didn't sit on balance sheets. They lived in the collective wisdom of the people who had built something extraordinary. Together,